So hi everyone and welcome to the Gradcracker webinar with INEOS. My name is Sophie, I'm a director at Gradcracker and I've been with the business for 12 years. I've been working with INEOS for the last 10 years and I'm really excited for you all to find out more about them today. I'm also joined by my co-director Carla, who I'm sure many of you will recognise from previous webinars. So Carla?
Hi everybody, hi, thanks very much Sophie. So my name's Carla, I'm a director at Gradcracker like Sophie just mentioned. I've been here for nearly 15 years next year, and similar to Sophie, I look after a lot of the employers who advertise on Gradcracker.
Thank you, Carla. During today's webinar, our aim is to find out more about INEOS, their opportunities and what life is like working there. Starting with our contact, Caroline from the HR team, will have an introduction to the business and their opportunities. The rest of the panel from INEOS will then talk to you about their educational background, their day-to-day roles, how the graduate schemes work, and what life is like at INEOS, as well as their future plans. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll discuss the recruitment process and give you some hints and tips on how to be successful in securing a role with INEOS, including some of the individual experiences of our graduates. If you've attended any of the webinars so far this season, you'll know that a new feature is that you can submit questions for us to ask the panel. So there will be some questions from you, our students, included in the webinar today. Okay, so let's get started. Caroline, can you tell our audience all about INEOS?
Yeah, of course, Sophie. So we are a very large privately owned multinational company. And just to give some high level stats, just as a bit of a flavour of how big we are. So we've got a turnover of approximately $65 billion. And we're made up of a number of different businesses. So we're currently at 36 individual businesses across 29 countries, 194 sites, and we employ about 26,000 people globally. So we are truly a multinational company. And all of you on this webinar or watching it back on the Gradcracker website, you will have come into contact with INEOS at some point today, whether that's from brushing your teeth in the morning with some toothpaste, from clothing. We protect food and water. We provide healthcare solutions. So truly, a vast business in terms of what we do. And we do have an increasingly external brand facing now with the automotive business, so the Grenadiers, cars, with the hygienics business, which has got hand sanitizer and all sorts of products for kitchen and bathrooms as well. So really a huge company. And also we've got a sports portfolio as well. So many of you would recognise the INEOS Grenadiers cycling team, football team, so Man United, has sparked quite a lot of people starting to realise who INEOS are. And also we've got a number of charitable initiatives as well. So a truly global organisation, but the core of the business is manufacturing. So we essentially, we make things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, lots and lots of things have been happening at INEOS over the last few years. So like you said, more and more consumer facing. So the INEOS name is getting out there more and more. And you're currently recruiting for your next cohort of graduates on the Gradcracker Company Hub. So could you tell the audience a little bit about the schemes that you've got on offer right now? We are going to hear obviously directly from the graduates in a few minutes as well, but if you could give us a flavour and an overview, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, of course. So I'd say we've got two main programs. So we've got the commercial program, which James on the webinar will be able to talk through a little bit more. He's currently on our commercial program. And also we've got an engineering program, and Brendan's gone through that, so he can give you more details. But they're the two main programs that we have, Sophie. So those that very much imagine themselves going into engineering, or those that might have an engineering background, but much more interested in the commercial side. And also Gabby's come through the commercial program as well, so he can give a little bit more of a flavour of kind of life post the commercial program as well.
Fantastic. And in terms of the length of the scheme, the locations that you might recruit into, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So on the engineering side, we've got a number of live vacancies based in Grangemouth in Scotland. So they're live on the Gradcracker website at the moment. And then on the commercial side, the length of the programme is around 5 years. And what we promise is 3 different roles, generally in 3 different countries and 3 different businesses. So we are essentially managing your career for the first 5 years of your time at INEOS. And what we're trying to do is build that real basis of commercial experience and knowledge. So 3 very different roles, from it could be procurement, it could be a more analytical role, but essentially what we're trying to do is really build those foundations during those first 5 years, and just giving you exposure to different countries, and also some different businesses as well.
That's great. Thank you, Caroline. We are going to touch in more detail about how you kind of determine those placements a little bit later on, but that's a great introduction for the scheme. So we're going to have our first student question now, which is from Joanne at Sheffield University. And she asked, what degree disciplines do you look for the commercial scheme?
Okay, that's a very good question. So we're relatively open. So we do look for STEM backgrounds. So you would typically see quite a lot of the students that are applying, and that are on the programme might be from chemistry, engineering, but also we like numerate people at INEOS. So we've got some economics, some mathematicians, so generally a STEM background.
That really fits well for the commercial programme.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Caroline. So now we are going to head over to meet the rest of our INEOS panel. We are joined by James, a current commercial graduate, and Brendan, who's completed the engineering graduate scheme, and also Gabby, who joined INEOS on the first ever intake of commercial graduates back in 2013. So we've got a real mixture of experiences today. So over to you, Carla.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Okay, James, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? So maybe where did you go to university? What did you study as a starting point?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for having us here. It's always exciting to talk about it. So I went to the University of York. I studied chemistry there. As Caroline was mentioned, it's one of those degrees that's quite sought after for this kind of program. I did my master's in chemistry, so I worked that was with a year in industry. So I worked for a year and a half under Unilever in Leeds, doing my master's in chemistry as an R&D scientist. So again, something quite different to what the commercial world and this commercial scheme is about, but really nothing to fear when you're applying for it. I've been at INEOS now for a year and a couple months, maybe a year and 3 months, so just about halfway through my first rotation. And my current role is business analyst for INEOS Aromatics, which is a producer of plastic precursor chemicals, let's say.
Perfect. And what kind of made you interested in INEOS? So why did you choose them to apply to?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was a couple of different things. I've grown up around the world. I've been lucky enough. I was born in Italy. I moved to Prague in the Czech Republic. I did some time in the US as well, in New York. So for me, this concept of being able to move around, ideally you get 3 countries. That might not happen depending on the kind of different scenarios in the world at the time. But, I hopefully will move around Europe, get to learn different parts of the world, their cultures, their languages. And then on top of that, work for a multinational company who is really at the forefront of chemicals industry, which again, I like having that tie back to my degree. Yes, I'm in a commercial role and I'm doing things in the world of business, whether it's finance, logistics, operations, or as an analyst right now. But I like that idea that at the heart of it, it's still chemistry. I can still break it down to molecules, polymers, and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So those transferable skills.
Absolutely.
So what is your rotation at the moment? So you mentioned about what you're doing, but tell me a little bit more about your team and where you sit within that team.
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, this is INEOS Aromatics, and we have this head office, as do several other businesses in London.
Yeah.
Our site is based in Belgium, Gale. So I've had the pleasure of visiting the site and meeting the people working there. But the team itself, it's a small commercial team. It's, I think, maybe 5 members at the moment, which is actually one of the nicest things I could have possibly wished for when applying to a graduate scheme. And I think we'll maybe touch on it a bit later.
Yeah.
But, there's myself, and I'm quite literally sat between our European director on my left and the CEO on my right. And it's that great environment where I have day-to-day exposure to both of them and the rest of the commercial team, as I mentioned, on a daily basis. So it's quite a small knit team. It's very lean. We work very efficiently. There's a lot to be done. And that's kind of the beauty of INEOS. You are given lots to do and you're accountable for it. But as a graduate, I think that's kind of what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that a little bit daunting though? Sitting between, big bosses.
It is. I mean, the concept of it might be daunting, but in reality, I mean, we're all people at the end of the day, and
Yes.
they've been incredibly nice. I mean, as I mentioned, I came as an R&D scientist, so I knew very little about the business world. I'd done my homework, obviously, when applying for the graduate scheme, and did my best to learn as much as I could. But inevitably, you're going to come up against things you don't know about. You're going to meet people that will seem daunting, but again, I think if you keep a few sound principles in mind, keep your manners, you're polite, everyone's going to be willing to help you and you'll manage. You'll definitely manage.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that introduction, James. I'm going to come on to you next, Brendan. So tell me, similar format, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Brendan Craggs. I started with INEOS in 2018, which seems like a long time ago now. I went through the Gradcracker website to apply for INEOS at the time. And when I was studying at Newcastle University, I studied mechanical engineering. I did the 3-year BEng course initially, and then moved on to do the masters as sort of an integrated masters MEng with low carbon transport. And yeah, since then I did the INEOS graduate program for 5 years, the engineering program, and did 3 different roles during my time. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to speak about those roles a little bit later on, but again, going back to, if you can cast your mind back to the beginning. So you were on Gradcracker, you found INEOS, and what was it for you about INEOS that made you want to apply?
I think going back to the application process for INEOS, one of the main standouts was that you get responsibility from day one. I wanted to work in a fast-paced environment from some of the internships that I'd carried out previously, and it was really clear from the INEOS website and the application process that you get that opportunity. Yeah. And then since working here for the last 5 or 6 years, it's definitely transparent that you do get a lot of opportunity. And I guess it sort of goes back to what James said, the sort of structure, the federal structure of INEOS really allows that to take place, whether that's between colleagues or through management. You get a lot of opportunities.
I bet that's quite comforting as well, isn't it? Knowing that when you've completed the graduate program, you are this complete person. They've given you all of the experience that you need to be able to then become successful in your career. But just a question. So you mentioned about doing internships whilst you were at university. So we do speak to a lot of people at university who think, should I do an internship? Would it be beneficial for me to do an internship? What advice would you give those students having been through university, doing those internships and then becoming a graduate?
I think the value of internships is, I think they're really important. It's really helped me understand, put the degree into perspective a little bit, because when you're there for 8-9 months of the year, it can be quite theoretical, and then being able to have that time over the summer for 3 months to apply that into real world problems in different industries, it gives you a bit of perspective. And I think from my different internships, it allowed me to make some conscious decisions about what industry I wanted to go into. I liked certain things about certain jobs, and other things less so. So, for example, I did one in the nuclear industry, which was very technical. And there was lots of positives around health and safety and the importance of that, which is equally important for the oil and gas industry and petrochemicals that INEOS is involved with. But it was quite slow pace, just because of the nature of the nuclear industry and all the hazards associated with it. And speaking to some of the people through the internship, they really advised that the industry INEOS is involved with would be really suitable for me.
Yeah. So would you say INEOS is quite more faster paced?
I would say it's fast paced. It's fast paced in terms of the industry we're involved with, because it goes up quite far upstream in terms of oil and gas, but it also goes quite far downstream in terms of its consumer facing, as Caroline was mentioning before, with some of our hygienics businesses. So you get that real overview, and because it can be quite a lean structure, and you get a lot of opportunities working here. The nature of the roles are quite fast paced, and I think it's something that for the right person, it's a great opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. And finally, just tell us a little bit about your current role.
Yeah, so my current role, so I finished the engineering graduate program in a commercial position, and then I moved into INEOS Energy and INEOS Energy's trading branch.
Yeah.
So I now work in the natural gas and liquefied natural gas trading position in business development. The term is LNG originator, but to 95% of people, that doesn't really mean a lot. So it's effectively a business development role in the energy industry.
Perfect. Well, we're going to find out a little bit more about that later on. But for now, thank you very much, Brendan, for that introduction. And Gabby, I'm going to come to you last but not least. Gabby is joining us from Berlin, which is very exciting. So tell us a little bit about your history with INEOS and why are you in Berlin?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the introduction there, Carla. So Gabby Isidro, I've been with INEOS just over 10 years. So I think just mentioned that I was on the first ever intake of the commercial graduate program. I'm actually, and I've made it, I'm through.
Yay.
I'm actually sat in Yay! I'm sat in Berlin because it is the industry's annual petrochemical conference. So this is where all corners of the industry and the globe come together for various kind of annual meetings and catch-ups. So apologies in advance, there's a little bit of background music, but I am in a hotel restaurant. So here I am.
You made it there, Gabby, you made it.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit more about your current role then, where you are within the business, what you get up to.
Well, it's been a fantastic whirlwind journey, and I am currently on the Enterprises board as head of commercial and business development. Enterprises won't mean a huge amount to a lot of people, but Caroline referenced right at the beginning that there's 36 business units that operate individually in the INEOS group. So I am a board member of one of those particular 36 business units, and happens to be quite a significant one in our chemical sector. I actually also lead global brand for INEOS. So I work for INEOS Capital on looking after our global brand and how we portray ourselves to the outside world.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to find out a little bit more about that later on as well. So cast your mind back, it's only 10 years ago, but where did you go to university? What did you study? And all those many years ago, being on the first cohort of graduates, what attracted you to INEOS?
Indeed. So I went to University of Warwick. I studied chemistry with additional management at the business school. And that ties in quite nicely as to why I chose INEOS, because although I did a very technical degree and still love chemistry to this day, I wasn't sure I wanted to work in a lab or in a purely technical environment. So I was really keen to bridge that kind of commercial business acumen, hence the additional management as part of that course. And INEOS screamed out at the time from a sort of even just a posting on and a graduate advert to say, you know, we're able to bridge that gap. So we do want this technical background. Of course, that's much broader now for all the right reasons, but you know, come and work from a business and commercial environment with a huge amount of opportunity, real job from day one aspect. Hence the choice.
And why are you still here? And progressing. So thanks very much for that introduction, Gabby. I'm going to talk to you all a little bit more in detail about your current roles and the graduate scheme. So Brendan, I'm going to come back to you and start talking about the engineering graduate scheme. So take us through that journey. So talk to me about the rotations that you've been on, the different, you know, Caroline mentioned about being in different countries. So tell me everything from start to finish, if you can.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I did the engineering graduate program, and as Caroline mentioned, there's two kind of routes within INEOS, engineering and commercial. So the engineering program is again 4 to 5 years long, and it's particularly closely aligned to the Institute of Engineers that you will be working with. So for me, it was the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. And there's a monitored professional development scheme that you work alongside to get to the point of being chartered. And INEOS really value that and help and support you in that journey, from taking you from being a graduate straight out of university to then working you towards being a chartered engineer. And that's the overall target, I would say, of the INEOS graduate program for engineers. So when you're trying to understand which roles you want to do best, you get assessed, or you can kind of assess yourself against your own competencies around what you've developed in specific roles, and you get an understanding of the business and which roles are, for example, more technical, or they might be more project management or more planning or a bit more communication based. And you can really put ideas forward for what roles you can do. So for me, I started in the integrity management team as an inspection engineer on the Forties pipeline system.
Yeah.
So INEOS owns the Forties pipeline system from the North Sea, which transports oil and gas offshore out towards Aberdeen area, brings it onshore, and then there's around a 200-mile pipeline travelling from Aberdeen all the way down into Grangemouth in Scotland. And then there, the oil and gas is all separated off and distributed onto vessels or downstream into the petrochemical sites. So as part of an inspection engineer's role, you were getting given different piping systems and really going around and checking the integrity of the pipe work or different vessels and making sure that they were fit for service.
Yeah.
So from that role, I got a lot of experience, technical experience, but also communication, because you had to build work packs to enable certain jobs to be carried out and give you access to get the right point to be able to inspect those.
Yeah.
So, but what I needed was a little bit more sort of planning and frontline engineering. So I changed role as an asset engineer, and that gave me a lot more experience on the more operational side of how a manufacturing plant works. I did that role.
Was this still during your first rotation, or was this your second rotation now?
Second rotation. So I did the first role for 24 months, 2 years, and then moved into the second rotation as an asset mechanical engineer. And that's slightly more operational based, I would say, rather than inspection. So it gave me a little bit of a different workload, different level of experience was required, but it gave me the right competencies to work towards the IMEC scheme.
Yeah. And then, so your first rotation was in Grangemouth. Was the second one still in Grangemouth, or had you relocated?
Yes. So for the engineering program, what I would say is it's less concerned with the location side of things. So as an engineer, you're less likely, I would say, and Caroline, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that you're less likely to be moved, say, from Grangemouth to Cologne and then to the south of France at the Lavira site, for example, because a lot of the time you can gain the experience that you need to become a chartered engineer in Grangemouth, or potentially move to our Runcorn plant or the plant in Hull. So it was more just a change of site, if you like, because there's 5 or 6 different facilities in Scotland. Yeah,
it's massive. It's Grangemouth. This is Grangemouth, everybody who's watching the webinar. Huge site. So you did the second rotation, and then what was the third rotation?
So my third rotation, at this point, I spoke with HR, and I really wanted to move into after doing that asset mechanical engineering role. Grangemouth and the INEOS businesses in Scotland were putting a lot of emphasis on their sustainability journey. So moving towards the net zero targets for 2045 in Scotland and 2050 for the UK. So a lot of decisions were being made to sort of secure the manufacturing future for INEOS in the UK. And at that point, I really wanted to get involved in a more commercial role and be a bit closer to some of the decision making that was supporting that. So I moved into a commercial operations role for the Forties pipeline system to finish off my monitored development scheme, if you like. And I applied for my chartership during that role. Yeah.
And you got chartership?
Yes, thankfully, yes. So I applied. I applied around 18 months ago and did the 4-month interview process, which is a bit daunting. But yeah, happily got the good news around 12 months ago.
Well done. Congratulations. That's amazing.
And Brendan, sorry, Carla, I just wanted to jump in there with with the scheme, because I know it typically lasts around 4 to 5 years, but you had your first rotation that was 2 years, and then how long were your other rotations? Is every rotation the same length, or can they vary depending on what the skills you need to get as part of the scheme?
Yeah, so I would say that the rotation length on the engineering scheme is less rigid. It's not necessarily a case of 2 years after the date you start, you will then move. So for example, if you do a role for 18 months, but it's becoming clear that you need to get some competencies to work to the development scheme, then you will change after 18 months. But if you're in a really good role that you are also enjoying and you're supporting the business with, then you can do that for longer if you like.
Okay. Thank you, Brendan. Sorry, Carla.
That's okay, my love. I was just going to ask you a question, Brendan. What was it? It escapes my brain. Yes, so you mentioned about HR being involved with your development and choosing your schemes and everything else, choosing your rotations. But what kind of support was given you within the team? So, for example, do you have a buddy or a mentor during your different rotations?
Yeah, you have both. So you've obviously got your line manager, you have a mentor, and you have a buddy. So you really have sort of 3 points of support. But another real good form of support, being a graduate at INEOS, is you also have everyone else. So there's lots of other graduates, I think maybe between 30 and 50 graduates generally during an intake. And being in a manufacturing hub, which a lot of the engineering scheme roles are, there's generally between sort of 5 and 10 people who are all sort of going through the same process. So when you have to submit your report, your quarterly reports or your chartership application, I would say you have your buddy, you've got a mentor who is a chartered engineer, and you've got your line manager, and then you've got everyone else who's going through the same process.
Perfect. So lots of help and support there. And just finally, so just briefly explain to the audience about your current role.
Yeah, so my current role is, as I mentioned, it's business development for energy trading arm of INEOS. So what we're moving into is really the business was developed to supply natural gas to a lot of our internal customers. And beyond that, as the energy security over the past sort of 2 or 3 years has, well, in an aim to increase our energy security, the LNG team was developed, and the purpose is to buy natural gas from the US, which is typically shale gas, liquefy it, and then transport it to Europe. So rather than solely relying on renewables for our power, or North Sea gas, or gas coming from Eastern Europe, the stable supply of the US really supports a lot of our businesses. So I'm in that team to help coordinate that and supply both internal INEOS businesses and external counterparties.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Brendan, for that. So we're going to come back to you, Brendan, towards the end of the webinar to speak a little bit about the application process, hints and tips and everything else. So I'm going to come back to you, James. I can't believe we're halfway through already. James, tell me all about your current position within INEOS and what you're getting up to.
Yeah, no worries. So as I mentioned, I'm currently a business analyst working for INEOS Aromatics. And to give you a brief overview, we produce PTA, which is purified tetraphthalic acid, and that goes into PET plastics, so polyethylene terephthalate. It's one of the most recycled downstream plastics, in fact, maybe the most recycled. So we have a lot of sustainability that we talk about on a day-to-day basis, and that's obviously where the nice downstream touch comes from. But again, high level, we are a PTA manufacturer. We source feedstocks. We actually have 2 plants in Belgium, Gail, a PX plant, a paraxylene plant, and a PTA plant. So in my role, I have the fun of doing a lot of day-to-day analysis on the optimization of our 2 plants. As you can imagine, for our PX plants, we'll have mixed xylenes as a feedstock, and we'll then produce the paraxylene through a series of reactions, and then further on onto the PTA. But equally, we could buy at the midpoint and buy PX directly from the market. So when you're working with commodities like this, there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done on just global trade, for example, but even within your region, what the supply demand is currently, what situation supply demand is currently in. And that's all kind of cohesively put into one role where you have the joy of working with all those different aspects to help guide the commercial team. So there's a business manager, which I work for, that's my line manager. And I will help navigate in the sense of, right, well, pricing for this month for a customer might be X, but pricing next month based upon what we're seeing in trade and what we're experiencing in the supply demand situation might be something completely different. So one aspect of my role is very much that day-to-day analysis. I will also have the more long-term view or strategic view where we're looking at, in the next 3 months or the next year, what is our plan and how can that be influenced by, as I mentioned, these core analytics of trade, supply, demand, operating rates, etc. So that's one portion of it. I've been quite lucky in my role specifically. As I said, it's quite a lean team where there's 5 of us. So the other side is I get a lot of ad hoc requests on different projects. So, whether it be we want a specific study on this downstream market because we don't have much insight into it, that would be something I would look into. Another example is trade defense. So at the moment, trade is one of the most fundamental things for chemicals in Europe. And looking into that and guiding that project and even leading that project is something I have responsibility of, which I think is really amazing being, again, a first year graduate. I've been there, as I mentioned, a year. So this is my first rotation. I'm halfway through it. And already I feel like I've been given quite a lot of responsibility. Now, one slightly different thing that I do, and that probably wasn't in my job description to start with, but something you'll learn very quickly at INEOS is your job description will evolve, develop as and when you need it, which is great because I found the first couple of months I was learning absolutely everything and anything to do with the petrochemical industry. I didn't know the acronyms, any of the small bits that, once you're in it, you are very simple, but to start off with, you definitely need a hand with. I didn't know any of those, but was able to progress quite quickly. And now I'm actually also responsible for some of the procurement of our site, which typically a business analyst wouldn't do as part of their traditional role. But it just goes to show how there's always opportunity. You will always be doing very serious roles with actual accountability. I hope it never gets to it, but let's say I don't procure the certain feedstock for our plant, there is an innate consequence to that. So I think that's one of the amazing things of this graduate scheme is it is quite clear that your role is impactful. You will be given a lot of work, but it is, not just busy work. It's something that has meaning and you'll appreciate that.
Yeah, every role is quite vital there, isn't it? And talk to us a little bit more about your, I don't know if it's too soon to talk about this, but your next rotation. So what kind of future plans do you have for the next 18 months or so?
Absolutely. I mean, so it's still very much unknown to me. What I can say, though, for example, is I'm currently working in a head office in London. As Caroline mentioned, ideally, we moved to 3 different locations, hopefully 3 different countries. So for me, that would, ideally mean somewhere outside of the UK. To give you an example, maybe Germany, maybe Belgium. We have a site in Lavera, France, that Brendan mentioned. So ideally, it'd be a different country. And also, as part of that development, right, I'd have a variety of exposure. So I've done something very head office, very focused on maybe more strategic and commercial decisions. But what I don't have a lot of exposure to, and what maybe I could learn more of, is the sort of operations or logistics side of the commercial business. So as I mentioned, London being a head office, it would be great to then move to, for example, a site. So whether Grangemouth is an example of a site where you can have a role as logistics planner, etc. So I don't know exactly what my next role will be. Probably something along the lines of based on a site with something more day-to-day operationally based could be a good example.
Yeah, and how does the relocation work then? So you're given quite a lot of time in advance, aren't you? To relocate. I think it's around 3 months, Caroline, if forgive me if I'm wrong there. So what help and support is given you to help you relocate?
Yeah, sure. So I think ideally, and again, Caroline will know best, but I think the goal is to have 6 months lead time. So I'll know hopefully quite well in advance, and that gives you plenty of time to prepare. But one of the key things of working at INEOS is you need to be flexible. So I think 3 months is probably the norm. And the support you're given there is obviously the HR team. They're there to guide you, both the central grad HR team, but you're also your own one, as in the company you're currently working for and the company you will be going to work for. Because as we mentioned, they will be different businesses. But also, as Brendan said, it doesn't just go for your work and professional career. It's also the personal, I call it personal, but relocation. You'll have all the other graduates. So one of the big things will be, if you're moving to Germany, there will be graduates based there, maybe in their second or third year rotations, or equally, you might be taking over from a graduate. So right there innately is a really simple answer of, you'll be entering a role a graduate's already had, so they can help you with housing. Immediately you already have a friend group in the sense that, you'll be talking to them on a day-to-day basis, and that will continue outside of work. But definitely that's kind of your support group. And as Brendan mentioned, you'll have a mentor that sticks with you throughout the graduate scheme. So you can always touch base with them, and they'll have experience living in different countries that INEOS has offices in. So I'm sure there'll be a good point of contact.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, James. And we did have a question from Philip at Imperial College London, who asked about why the rotations and the graduate scheme was so long. So hopefully, with all the experience that we've heard so far, Philip, that's given you the answer to that question. So Gabby, I'm going to come to you and cast your mind back to when you were a grad all those many years ago. Talk to us about your experiences with being on the commercial graduate programme.
Absolutely, with pleasure. Bear with me whilst I take everyone on that journey, because it has been quite the journey.
I'm excited, go for it.
So I remember very clearly getting the phone call from INEOS to say, you've been accepted into the scheme. And whilst I was recruited in the UK, the next question that came was, would you be willing to move to Cologne in Germany straight away and start the rotation there?
Wow.
And I was absolutely delighted. So I mean, literally packed a bag and moved to Germany and kind of started a new life there in my very early 20s. And what I did there was actually relatively similar to what James has described. So business analyst, but in this instance, working in our downstream polymers section. Now it's worth mentioning that Cologne is one of our largest petrochemical sites in Europe, if not the entire INEOS portfolio. So such valuable experience to be on the ground at one of our sites, which is really the core fundamental of INEOS. So it gave me a fantastic standing in the business to begin with. And from there, so I think I was there for about 2 years. Then from there, I hopped to London. So I actually was asked to look after, and I don't say look after lightly, I was very much involved in our energy trading business. So at the time, that looked after the procurement and trading of gas, power and emissions for a relatively large European portfolio. And I mean, the exposures were ginormous, the contracts totally new, and trading being a whole new ball game as well. So it was just absolutely fantastic experience, really thrown into the deep end, but with regards to accountability and a real job from day one, my goodness, it ticked all those boxes. And I learned a huge amount. From getting that experience and learning really quickly in that space, I was asked to support integrating our some upstream oil and gas assets. So way back in the day, for anyone who's done their research, INEOS sort of started to grow that portfolio by buying out a few big organizations in the North Sea. So I was very much part of integrating that, setting it up, and actually kind of as a bridged role, set up our energy trading business. So another of those 36 business units, which is now a standalone, and which Brendan is very much linked to. Then from there, that sort of kind of ended my graduate scheme. So you can imagine that's quite a lot packed into 5 years. And at that point, I was asked as an exit role to move to Switzerland. So one of the first grads to move to our head office over there and take on a business development role, reporting straight into the board of our olefins and polymers business unit. So back into kind of, I'd gone upstream, I was coming back down into kind of midstream, downstream olefins and polymers. And that was really, really good experience to sort of start interacting with the board, understanding how they communicate and operate. So very cool. And in parallel, I actually consulted for Project One. So with my energy and specifically gas and power experience, I was asked to lead the project back in the day, which looked at where we actually placed our new cracker location between different sites in Europe. So hopefully everyone's done their research on Project One, but that is going ahead as the latest and brand new, if not largest, investment in Europe from a cracker perspective. So I was involved really right at the start of that one. So really great experience. Pause for breath at that point then. I mentioned it was
I just listened to you doing all this.
the wrinkles and grey hairs coming through. No, I did say whirlwind. So pause, I'm quite happy in Switzerland, having working for our olefins and polymers. And at that point, COVID hit, and we set up as INEOS a business unit called Hygienics, and Caroline alluded to that right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's kind of almost, dare I say it, one of our first ever consumer-facing businesses and a pure startup. So I mentioned that in my career, INEOS has been very, very good at acquiring assets and businesses and making them INEOS, but actually this is an example of let's build this up from the ground. And why was it linked to COVID? We actually produced a huge amount of the ethanol-based sanitizer, which was extremely short at the beginning of the pandemic, and we generated a business out of that. And that's a fully fledged business now, which sells everything from hand sanitizer to a massive range of household products. And I worked for a number of years setting up the business, setting up the individual products, and as you can imagine, in the very nature of a startup, being involved and dabbling in absolutely every section of that business. I rose in there to become head of commercial. So I looked after sales, procurement and new product development. So took on a really big meaty role with a huge amount of accountability and ownership at that stage. And after doing that for a little while, I was promoted to become on the board of Enterprises, which looks after several business units as one of those main features in the INEOS group, and now head of commercial and business development. And alongside that, was recently asked to look after global head of brand. So plenty going on, plenty to do, and that's where I'm sat today. And I've moved from Switzerland back to London.
Okay. So I'm just going to change the itinerary slightly, Sophie, because I'm conscious of time. So Gabby, I'm going to stick with you. I could listen to you all day. Talk to me a little bit about your current role then. So what do you do on a daily basis, if you can tell me?
That's a really good question. I ask myself that a lot too. So the Enterprises business is so fascinating and cool within the INEOS group. We actually refer to ourselves as the INEOS within the INEOS, because whilst we talk about a portfolio that's 36 business units within big INEOS, Enterprises actually in its one pillar is 10 individually operating business units, Hygienics being one of them. So I'm on the board that overlooks all of those business units from a commercial and business development perspective. And commercial, you can imagine, is everything from kind of the people side of it to procurement to signing off large contracts and kind of supporting all the businesses from that perspective. But what's really juicy is the business development side of things, because Enterprises has more of almost a private equity feel. We're really flexible with the buy and sell of our businesses. So in that group of 10, we're constantly looking at opportunities to either vertically integrate kind of upstream, downstream, and then add some really random businesses into the mix, which we literally go out to market to buy and sell. So we're probably a bit more flexible than the rest of INEOS, which provides a huge amount of opportunity. And I literally go out and do the hunting and oversee that process all the way through to integrating a business into the group.
Wow. One last question, Sophie, one last question for Gabby. So Gabby, obviously you've been with INEOS for a while now and you've had an amazing career so far. Why do you think, apart from the sheer hard work and determination, I'm not going to take that away from you, but why do you think you have been successful? So basically, what hints and tips can you give students who are watching to be successful and have an amazing career like you have at INEOS?
Big question. I mean, I think I've been really, really open-minded and flexible to every single opportunity, and I've grabbed at each one of these with both hands and totally gone for it. And I think a really good example is the energy trading role way back when, where you know, I have to be honest, I had absolutely no experience. But what I do say to our young and new grads is, you know, the baseline of intelligence on the school is extremely high. We're all talking to graduates with fantastic degrees, and you really can set your mind to learning anything and getting to grips with it and flying with it. And INEOS is just kind of a really, really good basis for anyone with that level of open-mindedness and kind of, I'm going to grab this with both hands and I'm going to learn it. It may take me a little bit of time and I'm going to own it and you know, full accountability to move that forwards. So I think with that attitude and that openness to kind of learn and not be in a position where you sort of go, well, that's not in my job description, but actually be open to every opportunity, it just sets you up really, really well in INEOS. And I've certainly, you know, have to pinch myself almost every day on what I've been able to do and what I've managed to achieve as a result of that attitude.
Yeah, I think that's come across with all three of you, to be honest with you, about you know, being open to new challenges, new experiences and everything else, and just own it. And I'm going to own this section of the webinar and pass it over to Sophie to own this one. But thanks so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
It's been so interesting listening to all of your experiences, and I really think that everything you just said there, Gabby, is, you know, you can do anything, you know, listening to you, you know, the careers that you have all had so far, so much experience. So what I'm going to do, Caroline, is I'm going to come to talk to you a little bit about the rotation management towards the end of the webinar, because I just really want to nip back to Brendan before we kind of finish everything off and talk about the recruitment process, about another thing that is incredibly unique to INEOS of all the things that we've heard so far. But yeah, which is the Namibia Challenge, which graduates can undertake in the 4th year of the graduate scheme. And Brendan, you've been through this. So do you want to tell our audience a little bit about this incredible opportunity, experience, everything about it if you can?
Yes. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough, some would say, to go through it a couple of years ago now. So yeah, so it's quite a long journey. So I'll start off when 12 months before the Namibia Challenge, where you sign yourself up to running marathons, cycling hundreds of kilometers through sand, and climbing a mountain that's nearly 3,000 meters, all in 7 days. Wow. So INEOS put a lot of value on this challenge to their graduates, because it's not necessarily the physical element, but the value comes from, I guess, as Gabby sort of was alluding to there, it's the sort of ability to look at yourself and take on new challenges without sort of holding yourself back. And really, the marathon running, the cycling is a fine example of that, because before I started it, I couldn't even really, to be honest, run 2 or 3 kilometers without having to stop for breath. But then by the end, with the other 30 or 40 graduates, we signed up to Barcelona Marathon and ran that as a large contingent, all in our sort of training for Namibia. So it's a 7-day event. Every single day you're doing something. You're waking up at 4:30 a.m. to set off before the Namibian sun hits you. And each day you're doing a combination of half marathon, say 50-kilometer cycling. You eating as much as you possibly can to get all the calories and energy back into you. You wake up, run a marathon, cycle 50 kilometers through the sand, which is the toughest part for a lot of people. And then you climb the mountain in Namibia, the Brandberg mountain, which is 2,800 meters, which for me was the toughest part, because I don't really enjoy my hill walking. So setting off on an 11-hour trek, carrying you sleep at the top and walk down the next day. So you carry all your water, all your food, all your sleeping equipment. So it was really tough, and it's a mixture of all of those activities over 7 days. But you get to know all the graduates really well. 3 executives within INEOS do it, so at CEO or director level, and it really just encompasses the INEOS attitude, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think, you know, relating back to all of your experiences so far and, you know, what INEOS is looking for in a candidate, it really does encompass all of, you know, what's expected and what type of person they're looking for. And there is so much information about the challenge on the Gradcracker Company Hub. So if you want to go find out more, watch videos, see pictures, we've got loads of stuff on the hub. But like I said, it is one of those things that, again, is incredibly unique to INEOS, and you wouldn't get that experience on any other graduate scheme.
No.
So Caroline, I'm going to come back to you now to talk a little bit more about the graduate scheme itself, firstly, because I know that everything we've talked about in terms of the way that the commercial scheme is managed, there's a huge amount of thought and effort and planning that goes into ensuring your graduates come out as rounded and as good as they possibly can be. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you kind of look at each graduate and decide what those rotations might look like?
Yeah, of course. And I think James and Gabby gave great examples in terms of, you know, James of the role he's in and where he thinks he might go next, and also listening to Gabby in terms of her career. And I think just coming back to that point from Philippe mentioning the duration of the program seems quite long, and it does if you look at it as a graduate program. But when you listen to Gabby's career, you know, even since the 5 years of the program, you know, she's continued to develop, continue to work in different businesses, different roles. So we tend to see it more of a kind of a developmental program. So we are looking after your careers guaranteed for the first 5 years, and we quite often see people like Gabby that just then do continue. So I just wanted to touch upon that. But yeah, an awful lot of thought goes into it. So what we're essentially doing is trying to recruit people that by the end of the 5 years or 4 years have had really a good variety of different exposure and experiences, and whether that's different roles, different countries. But essentially, you know, James touched upon, he's currently in an analyst role. We'd then probably look to put him into more of an operational role. So it's just really trying to understand, you know, what roles are available, because we don't just create jobs at INEOS. These are live roles, and I think you've heard from all three people so far that there's a lot of responsibility and accountability on people. So we're not a graduate program that will recruit a certain quota a year and we'll just find jobs as we go. We do, these are live jobs that have come from the businesses, they've had director sign off. We as the centre are looking at them, that making sure that they're real jobs and that they are giving us the variety of different skills that we need. So yeah, lots of conversation with the graduates as well. We do ask people to be very flexible, so that is part of this recruitment process that we run. We are asking you to sign up to trust us for the 5 years. We've been doing it for 11 years now, so we know what we're doing. But what we can promise is variety and you know, a very, very exciting graduate program.
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, that's it. It's great that you look at everyone on such an individual basis and really think about what's going to be right for them as an individual, as well as what's right for INEOS, and kind of match it all the way through. And because you have got 36 individual businesses, there are so many different opportunities to find the right places for people. So I think it's really interesting to hear kind of how that works. Now that we've kind of heard everybody's journeys, I do just kind of want to finish off by touching upon the recruitment process. Caroline, can you give us an overview about, you know, what the graduates need to do? Go on Gradcracker. When they click that apply button, what happens next?
Yeah, exactly that. So from a commercial perspective, I'll talk through that, and then I'll give a bit of commentary at the end of how the engineering application process is slightly different. It doesn't vary too much. But from a commercial perspective, you've hit the apply button, and then we will ask you to fill out an application form, which I think is very standard for most graduate roles, and that includes a CV. We then will review that and invite you to complete some pre-screening questions. So these are a number of questions that we'd like you to give us a written commentary on essentially how you're viewing INEOS, and they'll be quite topical. So you're having to spend some time researching the business and what's going on in the market as well. So we want to show that you spent the time on that. We then review those and we'll invite you to an interview. So that will be both a competency interview, but also asking you some commercial questions. And then the next stage would be an assessment centre. So that's with a number of other candidates and managers across all the different businesses within INEOS. And that's a number of different activities, from a group exercise to commercial interviews to a competency-based HR interview, essentially. And then our final stage, we tend to run it either in London or Switzerland in Roll. and we will have a dinner with you the night before to put you at ease, to get to know you a little bit better, and for you to get to know us better. And then the following day, we spend most of the day with you. So a number of commercial interviews, and an analysis exercise as well, and another behaviour, essentially another HR interview, just to spend a bit more time with you and get to know you a little bit better, and also to make sure that INEOS fit is there. So it's really important, you know, from the graduate and from our side, that we're getting that fit just right. Mm-hmm. So that's the commercial scheme. Engineering is very, very similar, other than rather than commercial interview, they will have some technical questions as well for their engineers, but very, very similar process there as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Caroline. So it's quite a rigorous process. Yeah, there's quite a lot of, and there's a lot of one-on-one time there with the HR team and other members of INEOS as well, isn't there, to really understand whether the grads are going to be right for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's feedback that we do get, and I'm very proud of with the team, that people do feel like they've had the opportunity to really get to know INEOS. It feels very personable. And, you know, considering the size of the company, we don't do, you know, pre-recorded videos. That's not something we do. We want to get to know you, make sure the fit's right. And also for graduates, you know, it's a big decision where you're going to go fresh out of university. So it needs to be right on both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a two-way street. So you need to understand that it's right for you as well. Brendan, I'm going to hop over to you very quickly because obviously you've attended one of the assessment centres for engineering. What information were you given in advance? What would you what advice would you give our audience about attending an assessment centre with INEOS?
Yeah, I would echo what Caroline said. I think it's important to do your research on the company, and I think there's a lot of information out there on INEOS, on the website, on what projects we're involved with, and there's 36 different businesses that INEOS have. So I think having the ability to really get a feel for the company is important, and understand that it's the right fit for you. Going through the assessment centre, when you have your one-on-one interviews, or when you have your group assessment centres, you really get a feel for whether INEOS is the right company for you. I think for me, the process felt quite unique in a way. Yeah. And it just really worked well for myself.
Brilliant. And James, I'm going to come back to you now for your kind of tips as well, because the final stage of the recruitment process that we heard of for the commercial scheme is face-to-face interview, where you actually get to meet members of the board as well, which can sound quite daunting. So could you tell us more about that and your advice to our audience on how to manage that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's quite simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but really, you know, you have to do your homework, as I put it. You know, research INEOS, go to their webpage, go on Gradcracker. They have a great page on INEOS as well. There's lots of info there. Do that homework. You know, press releases. What are the core businesses? You know, what is Project One? What is a cracker? Do that homework. I think that, you know, it goes without saying, but it has to be done. Because when you get to those interviews, you'll have so much else on your mind. You will be nervous. It is daunting. But what you absolutely need is to be confident in what you know. So that means prepping well beforehand. And that leads to the final part where you will get asked a question you don't know the answer to. There'll be a scenario you're uncomfortable with. You'll not know the answer. And the main thing is, my advice, and hopefully what I did in those interviews as well, they were quite a while ago, but it is not to panic. I think, you know, my advice would be try to think through what the problem is. I like to think out loud when I get asked a question I don't know, and sometimes it's more about hearing what the person's process or logic is more valuable than actually the answer. So don't panic. Try to think through the question. And if you really don't know, I mean, ask questions, be inquisitive. You know, I think the worst thing you can do is get caught up in the fact that you don't know the answer, and that you have the feeling this has gone terribly wrong. At the end of the day, as I said, we're all human, we're all people. They will have sat through many interviews with tons of graduates and understand themselves how nervous it must be. So I think my advice would be do your homework. That's the simple part. Come in confident with what you know, and then don't panic when you get asked something you don't know, because inevitably it will happen.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you, James. And Gabby, I'm going to come back to you. Have you done any interviews with graduates since you've joined, since you've progressed through the company? Is there anything that you would say why people would stand out to you in an interview?
I have actually. I've had the pleasure of doing quite a few over the last few years. What would stand out? I mean, I'm giggling away because I remember my assessment center, I got asked about a particular project in Florida at the time, and I remember it vividly. And I had no idea. I was literally like, no idea what they're talking about. But I think, I mean, to almost branching off what James said, being really honest is really, really important. And to finish that off, I did say very clearly, I don't know. You know, INEOS is a really kind of honest and straight talking company with no fluff in that sense. So you know, we appreciate that. We obviously want confident graduates, but that honesty and that kind of people connection is absolutely vital. So it's really easy to say, but to try and be yourself and enjoy the process is really important, and that's how we will get the best out of people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Gabby. And thank you everybody for giving us such a great insight into INEOS today. It's been amazing speaking with you all and hearing all of your different stories and, you know, what you've done at INEOS so far at various stages of your career. And remember, the commercial graduate scheme and engineering graduate schemes are live on the INEOS Gradcracker Hub right now for you to apply to. The commercial scheme will close to applications on the 31st of October, and the engineering schemes close on the 2nd of December. So we still have a little bit of time to get those really good quality, well-researched applications into INEOS. The recording of this webinar will be available for you to watch in full tomorrow on the INEOS Gradcracker Company Hub. We'll also break this up into bite-sized highlights covering some of the key topics we've discussed today, which there will be lots of after everything we've discussed today. And remember, our employers absolutely love it when you tell them that you've watched their webinar, as it shows that you've already got a really good understanding of the company. You've got some amazing hints and tips today about INEOS, and it shows that you've got a real interest in working for them as well. So make sure that you go and get your applications in for INEOS and let them know that you were here today. On Thursday at 2 p.m, Carla and I will be talking to Centrica. So register your interest, submit any questions that you might have, and we hope that you'll join us then. And thank you once again to INEOS, and bye-bye. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.